right, so then participants talking experiences. Also threatening to cause harm to you, attempting to harm you, physically harmed you. So they talked about all of this. So you realize that they go details into the stalking experiences. These details you will not find in the abstract. You have to go and read to even know which of the stalking is more dominant than others. Then mental health outcomes. They looked at anxiety, moderate anxiety, severe anxiety, and then they looked at clinical depression. And here they looked at the experiences of stalking and then what do you call it? Depression and mental illness. So it's experience any stalking behavior in the past 6 months. It was significant. Experience unwanted contact in the past 6 months. It was also significant. Experience unwanted following was also significant. Experience unwanted threat. So when the student experienced threats, it adds to the anxiety and depression. When they experience unwanted following, it adds to the anxiety and depression. When they experience unwanted contact, it adds to their anxiety and depression. And when they experience stalking, any stalking at all, it also increases the anxiety and depression. So here they looked at, then they added whether age, being in a relationship, being married also has any influence. Now, these factors did not have any influence on their, what do you call it? On their experience of anxiety and depression, all right? So when you are reading from quantitative aspect of even of a mixed method, the numbers should speak to you. Then here they continue with the, what do you call it? The qualitative aspect, where the participants, where they talk about positive versus negative perception. So participants delineated a clear difference between positive and negative perception of stalking. Positive stalking was described as men who were interested in getting to know a woman and wanting to be their friend, which was more well received if the woman was interested in the man. So here you look at how women were classifying positive stalking or positive perception of stalking. That if the women were interested and you, the man, you are pushing to know them, then they classify that as positive. And then they also how they classify negative. Until you come and read these details, you will not understand how they were defining positive, what do you call it? Positive perception of stalking. So here the key definition of positive stalking is when the woman was interested. If the woman is interested and the man is just demonstrating willingness to know him or to know the woman or wanting to be a friend. Okay, so these are the two key criteria, that the man is wanting to be a friend or wanting to know him, and the woman is interested. When these two conditions are met, they classify it as positive stalking. Then the negative stalking usually was described as having more sinister elements. The fear of negative stalking is reflected by one participant who noted, most of the time it is obsession. They want to have you by force. So whether you resist or you don't resist, they want you. So they are coming for you. So these are also the indicators that they are using for identifying negative stalking. And that means they are defining it as the men stalking that has sinister elements. And the sinister elements, some of the elements they talk about is when the stalking becomes an obsession, or when the men apply force to the stalking process. All right. So the idea, what I wanted to highlight for you to know is that always endeavor to read the sections for details. Don't just focus on the abstracts, and don't just focus on the summary. You will lose critical details that will add nuances to your research. Okay. Any question? So when you are summarizing mixed method paper, summarize all the quantitative findings separately, summarize all the qualitative findings separately. That's how it should be. Don't mix them together. If it's mixed method, just have a heading, quantitative findings, bullet your findings. Have a subheading, qualitative findings, bullet your findings like that. I will show you a table that you can use to do that in the last module that I'm going to take. Any question so far? Okay. So this is the last module, and this one I'm going to touch on three key things, sorry. How do you structure your literature review chapter? So now we are going into literature review as a product. Okay, we've gone through the process. Now we are entering into literature review as a product. How do you structure your literature review chapter? How do you combine evidence from different papers? How do you write so that we can hear your voice? This is very, very critical, especially at the PhD level. If you write and we don't hear your voice, your thesis can be failed. So how do you make sure your voice is showing in your literature review? Or not just in your literature review, but your entire thesis? How do you make sure that your voice is your voice is heard? But we focus on the literature review because for the literature review, you are basically going to talk about other people's research. So how do we hear you when you are talking about others? These are the three key things that I'm going to focus on. So let's look at first the structure of it. Okay, this is a typical structure that is usually like a typical structure of a literature review chapter. Okay, where you have your introduction, you have your theoretical framework, you have your, let me take it from the presentation mode so I can write on it as well. So can you see it still? Please, can you still see it? Okay. So you will have your introduction. So your introduction, this is where you are going to have to talk about what the chapter is about, what you are going to talk about in the chapter, how the chapter is structured, just to introduce your readers to the chapter. Usually after talking about your theoretical, after the introduction, you can write on your theoretical framework. Unless you, the writer, you have decided that you want to make a theoretical framework a chapter on its own. If you want to combine them, then after your introduction, your theoretical framework should be the best thing that should follow. Under your theoretical framework, you can talk about, if you are using two theories, you can talk about theory 1, you can talk about theory 2, you can talk about theory 3, depending on how many theories you are using. Okay. Now, when you talk about theory 1, definitely you have some concepts you are going to use. When you talk about theory 2, you may have some concepts you are going to use. When you talk about theory 3, you basically have some concepts you are going to use. All right, so after you've talked about your theories and each of the concepts in isolation, then the next point to move on will be your conceptual framework, which you have discussed earlier. So here, this is where you are going to combine your concepts. It's like you are going to integrate your theories together, but you are going to integrate your concepts together to form a conceptual framework. All right, you've already talked about that, so I won't spend too much time there. Now, after talking about your conceptual framework, then you have to move on to your empirical literature or your empirical evidence. Here, under your empirical evidence, you should structure it such that your objectives are well captured. Okay, if you have 4 objectives, your first subsection should be your first objectives. What does empirical literature say on your first objective? You have to have it as a subsection and discuss all the empirical studies you have read on your first objective and what the empirical studies say. Then when you finish, you pick your second objective or your second research question as a subsection under your empirical literature section. And then you discuss all the empirical studies you have read on your second objective. What do they say? When you finish, you pick your third objective. All the empirical studies you have read on your third objective, what do they say? You have to discuss all of these things. So if you were to say you are writing a chapter 2, the introduction will be, let's say 2.1. Your theoretical framework will be 2.2. Then your first theory will be 2.2.1. Your second theory will be 2.2.2. Your third theory will be 2.2.3, depending on how many theories you are using. Then your conceptual framework will now take you to 2.3. Usually, you may not have subsections under conceptual framework to be able to number them, all right? Then you move to your empirical evidence, or sometimes people call it review of related studies. The empirical studies will now become like something like a 2.4. So your first subsection, which is discussing your first objective, will be 2.4.1. Then the next section will be 2.4.2. The next will be 2.4.3. So if you have 5 objectives, you are going to write on each of the 5. If you have 4 objectives, you are going to write on each of the 4. Then when you finish, the last thing you write on will be summary of the literature. This is where you are going to summarize everything you've written in that in the chapter. You are going to summarize your theories, and you are going to synthesize it with your the empirical studies. All right. So this is a typical structure that you can adopt for your literature review chapter. If you are writing your theories, your conceptual framework, and your empirical studies together. Some institutions will make you write theoretical framework in a different chapter, or even add it to chapter 1. But in a typical literature review chapter, this is how it looks like. But also consult with your institution to know which of the way they want you to go. Okay. Now, when you are reading your empirical studies, this is a table, a simple table you can adopt. Okay. So the first section here, you have author date. So and so 2013. Here you have the method. Is it quantitative? Is it qualitative? Is it mixed method? If it's quantitative, is it survey? Is it, so here you summarize the methods here. All right, so you summarize the methods here. So you summarize the method in terms of the methodology used, the approach, whether it's quantitative and it was a survey, is quantitative was an experiment, or whether it was qualitative when it was individual interview, or qualitative and it was focus group, or it was mixed method. Sample that they use. Did they sample students? How many students? Did they sample pregnant women? How many of them? Did they sample organizations? How many organizations? You have to indicate. Here, you have to write about which theory did the paper use. Here, you write the key findings. The key findings, when you are writing, use bullet points. Bullet point. So first, maybe gender was significant, blah, blah, blah. Then the next bullet, you have to bullet all the key findings. Don't mix them together. Every key finding you get must have its own bullets, so that by the time you're done, you are finished, you know, oh, this paper had reported 6 key findings, or 5 key findings, or 7 key findings. The next level here will be interpretations. The interpretations will be how they are explaining the findings. The interpretations will be how they are explaining the findings. And that one, you will need it from the discussion section. But at least, even if you're able to do it up to this here, up to the key findings, it will help you a lot when you are synthesizing. Because when you are done, you have to fill this table before you begin to compare and contrast studies. So for example, if this study found that females report higher depression, if females report higher depression, then this study also, another study here also found that females report higher depression. But a third study rather said that maybe you have a third study that says that males report higher depression. Synthesizing empirical studies means that you are going to combine all these studies, their findings together, and make a statement about it. This one says females report higher depression. This one says female report higher depression. This one says males report higher depression. Straight away, this is telling you that the findings looking at gender and depression is inconsistent. This is what the study is showing. The findings are showing that there has been inconsistent findings relating to how gender affects depression. Out of 3 studies reviewed, 2 of the studies have reported that females report higher depression. You put those studies in bracket. One study, however, reported that one study, however, found males report higher depression. Then you have to go ahead and explain why is it that these people found females to be having higher depression and why this one found males to be having higher depression. You now have to go and find out. You will not know this until you've summarized all your empirical studies. And now you are now beginning to analyze the summary that you have done. Okay, so this is a table that you should find and you should use to guide your writing of the literature review, especially the empirical studies. When you are reading, you should be summarizing them. You have to finish reading and summarizing all the empirical studies. Do analysis of their findings before you begin to write on your empirical literature. This is very critical that you have to take note of. Any question to this, up to this? Because we are moving into another critical element, which we may take a little bit of time. Now we are going into, let's say you have finished reading all your empirical papers. You have done your analysis of the empirical papers. You are now beginning to write. So you've opened the first chapter. You've opened a fresh page. You've typed chapter 2, literature review. You've done your outline. I'll write 2.1, introduction. I'll write theoretical framework. I'll write this. I'll write this. Now you start writing. There's something we call the writer's voice. There's something we call the writer's voice. In a doctoral research, the only thing people want to hear is your voice. Let this be your guiding principle. In doctoral studies, there's one thing every reader wants to know: your voice. What are you saying? So the writer's voice is the way you assert your own presence in your dissertation or your thesis. The way you show that you are present in the work. Some scholars say that you are creating your authorial self. Okay, you are creating your authorial self. That means that after we have read your work, or even in the process of reading your work, if you are Lily, as you see Lily in the work, as you hear Lily talking in the work. If you are Mercy, as you hear Mercy talking in the work. If you are Rachel, as you hear Rachel talking in the work. Whatever your name is, we should hear you talking in the work. Okay, but here is the case. Research says that you have to say what other people have said. How then do we identify which one is your voice, which one is your voice, which one is other people's voice? Okay, now there are different techniques you can use to make sure that your voice is heard. And here I'm going to share just a few of them with you. Here I'm going to talk about 5 strategies that you use to show that, to let your presence be felt in your own write-up. First is the way you organize your text organization. We'll talk about that. Second is the use of personal pronouns. We'll talk about that. Third is the choice of your citation pattern. The way you cite people's work in your work, okay, can either highlight your voice or it can silence your voice. Then the kind of reporting verbs you use when you are reporting what people have said, the reporting verbs you use. And also sometimes some adjectives, adverbs that you use without knowing. These things can either highlight your voice or it can silence you. Okay, so let's take the first one, text organization. Text organization. Text organization is about the way you are going to structure your statements and your sentences. The way you are going to structure your statement and your sentences. One key way you can use is what we call, you can start with unattributed assertions. Unattributed assertions. When you have analyzed your findings from different authors, in the first one that I said, the first paper said male report higher depression. Second paper says females report higher depression. Third paper says males report higher depression. Then you look at these 3 findings and you tell yourself, then the findings on gender and depression is not consistent. So you can start your statement. You can start your statement research about gender and depression, or research findings about gender and depression has produced inconsistent findings. Full stop. This is your voice. Okay, that statement is not attributed to any of the papers you read. This is your voice that you have analyzed from the papers. So you can start with a statement like that, and now you provide statement to support what you have said. So once you say that research about gender and depression is not consistent. For example, out of 3 studies reviewed, 2 studies have found that females report higher depression than males, whilst 1 study has found that males report higher depression. Now, the inconsistency in these findings could be as a result of, so you realize that you have made a statement that wasn't attributed to anybody, so that becomes your voice. Then you now pull your empirical study, the findings you have found from different studies to support that statement you have made. Okay? We usually call such things topic sentence. You make a statement, you use the literature you have read to support the statement. Okay? That is usually the best approach to go. Some people can also make explicit connections between citations. Okay? Explicit connection between citations. That so-and-so 2016 reported that females found that females report higher depression than males. Similar findings has also been reported in other countries, such as so-and-so and so-and-so. So here, you are just focusing on making connections between citations. And so you have to understand that the reason why we say that you can't start writing your literature whilst you are doing your readings. These are some of the reasons why we say that. You have to finish all your readings before you begin to write. By finishing all your readings, you're able to draw connections, you are able to draw associations, and you can use that to even deduce some statements that can be your own and that you can pull evidence to support. All right. So when you organize your text very well, your voice can be very much heard. If you don't organize your text well, your voice will be missing in the plenty things you are going to write. All right. And then also we talk about personal pronouns. Your thesis, you are going to write your thesis alone, even though you are going to have supervisors. But everything is going to be your work. So a personal pronoun can be I. But even this one, there are some differences. Some disciplines will not let you use personal pronouns. Some disciplines will agree that you should use personal pronouns. But there are some places that you can use personal pronouns and it will be allowed. When, for example, first one, when you are explaining activities you have done, okay, especially when you are talking about methodology, or when you are talking about even your literature review, that I conducted systematic literature search from 4 databases. I use Google Scholar, I use Scopus, I use CiteFX, I did this, I did that. You can, when you're talking about something you have done, you can use personal pronouns. It makes you become present in the work. Or maybe when you're writing the introduction to your chapter. So you see that in this chapter, I discuss 4 things. First, I discuss the theories that form the basis of the work. After the theories, I move on to discuss the conceptual framework. Next, I discuss empirical literature, and then I provide a summary of the literature. So when you're about to write introduction to a chapter, you can use personal pronouns. All right, when you use personal pronouns, it helps the readers to connect you to the work, and they're able to hear your voice. So when you are talking about activities you have undertaken, you can use personal pronouns. When you're explaining how you have structured your work, especially in chapter 1, where we talk about organization of the study, people will say, this study is structured into 4 chapters. Chapter 1 describes, chapter 2 describes, chapter 3 describes, and the work is depersonalized. You can say, in this work, I have structured the work into 4 chapters. In chapter 1, I discuss so-and-so, so-and-so. In chapter 2, I look at so and so. In chapter 3, I discuss the methodology. So in such things, you are allowed to use personal pronouns so that people can connect you to your work. When you talk about even your theoretical framework, you can say, in this study, I use 3 key theories for my work. And you can list the theories you have used. Okay, so usually when you are about to introduce a section, you are allowed to use personal pronouns so that you can be connected to the work. So learn how to use personal pronouns very well. Or even when you disagree with an author, what an author says, you can also use personal pronouns. We'll look at how that one works later. But personal pronouns helps your voice to be heard in your write-up. It's very important. And then the choice of citation pattern. You know, there are 2 kinds of citations. There's a narrative citation and there is a parenthetical citation. Parenthetical citation is where you make the statement and you put the citation in a bracket in front of the statement. Like this one here, global warming is a serious threat to the planet, into bracket Clark 2006. This is a parenthetical citation. Then we have narrative citation. This is where you use the citation to make you add a citation to the sentence. So when you hear, according to Clark 2006, global warming is, this is a narrative citation. Okay, this is a narrative citation. Now, whether you are using a narrative citation or a parenthetical citation, the way it is organized. So this table, for instance, there's what we call propositional responsibility. Then I have here writer, I have here author, then I have here examples. Propositional responsibility means that who is responsible for making these statements? Who is responsible for making this statement? Then here there's a writer. The writer is you. The writer is you the candidate. Then we have the author. The author is the people you are citing. Okay, the people you are citing. So when the writer, when you take a full responsibility for a statement you are making, you, the writer, you become the central, and here any author is absent. You don't cite any author. For example, global warming is a serious risk to the planet. Full stop. There's no author here. There's no citation here. So this means that the writer takes full responsibility for this statement. And it now becomes the responsibility of the writer, which is you, to now provide evidence to justify this statement. So for instance, when you open a paragraph by saying that research on gender and depression is inconsistent, and you don't cite anybody, it means that you, the writer, you are taking full responsibility for this statement. All right? And now it becomes your responsibility to pull out evidence you have read to support this statement. So if this statement is not adequately supported, people can say you are making wild claims. Support this statement. Then we also have a situation where you share responsibility. We have shared responsibility. All right, this here, shared responsibility. But even the shared responsibility, we have where you, the author, you are taking a dominant share, and the authors you are citing are taking subordinate share. So when you say global warming is a serious risk to the planet, and you use parenthetical citation, it means that you, the researcher, you are deducing this statement, but you are using this person's evidence to support the statement. So it means that you, the writer, takes a dominant responsibility. The authors you cited take subordinate responsibilities. Okay? If you do shared, and you, the writer, when you make a statement like Clark 2006 points out that global warming is a serious threat to the planet. When you use narrative synthesis like this, you, the writer, you have taken a subordinate responsibility. The author, the people you are citing have taken dominant, you've given dominant responsibility to your authors that you are citing. So if all your writings are like this, If all your writings are like this, Clark 2006 said, according to so and so found that all that you are saying is that you are giving dominance to people you are citing and you are taking backstage. That means that by the time you are done, you are nowhere near the work. We can't find you in the work. Okay, so when you have written a paragraph, always make sure read the paragraph again. Are you taking a dominant responsibility or you are taking a subordinate responsibility? If you are taking a subordinate responsibility, it is clear that your voice is not being heard. We are hearing the people you are citing. We are not hearing you. So as much as possible, you have to make sure that you are doing enough of shared responsibility where you are taking dominant responsibility. That means that as much as possible, you should be using parenthetical, parenthetical citations a lot of the time. You only use narrative where you give dominance to the author you are citing when the author is a key authority and they have made a statement that is so significant. Then you can say, according to so and so. If the author you are citing is not a well-known author, don't use according to. All right? Don't use according to. Use according to for only key scholars in your field. According to so and so 2060, who is the key proponent of this theory, always make sure that in P, we say the Odi Naebo. You can't read about somebody's study from Nigeria who samples 300 reported findings and you are saying according to. Or a study from somewhere, America, and they just reported findings from different people and say according to. Use according to when you are talking about key scholars in your field. Whenever the people you are talking to, you are citing are not key scholars, use parenthetical citation so that you take the dominant responsibility so that your voice can be heard. Then also, evaluative nature of the reporting verbs. Reporting verbs that you use can also demonstrate your voice. Okay, there are different kind of reporting verbs. Here, when you are writing, when you agree with the author that you are writing, so when you say, so and so 2016 found that, so and so 2017 showed that, so and so 2017 pointed out that, it means that you agree with them. If you don't agree with them, don't use these reporting verbs. All right? When you want to show your disagreement or when you want to criticize, then you can use certain reporting verbs such as omit or such as fail to. So you can say that maybe so and so 2014 maybe reported significant gender differences between males and females, but they fail to explain the reason that might be accounting for the significant gender difference. So they say males reported higher depression than females, but they fail to explain why the females were reported. So such a statement, anybody who reads such a statement will know that the writer disagrees with the author, or the person who owns this thesis disagrees with the people who reported these findings. So there are statements you make which shows that you agree with what the findings say. There are statements you make which show you disagree. Always be sensitive to these things. There are some verbs you also use that show that you are neutral. You are not showing whether you agree or you are not showing whether you disagree. You are just reporting. People should make their own decision. So people can say, so and so 2014 examined the significant differences between, or so and so advocates, or so and so discusses, or so and so 2016 suggests that. When you write this, you have not taken a stand. Okay? And make sure that your writings is not full of these things, because you are writing a thesis, we want you to take a stand. So if all your statements are saying so and so examined, and so reported, and so discussed, and so, you have told us what people are saying. You are not telling us whether you agree with them or you disagree with them. So should we think for you? Do you get it? So those of you who have drafted something, you have to read it again and see whether most of the reporting verbs you are using are neutral voice. Neutral voice means we are not hearing your voice, whether you have a stand or you disagree. Always make sure your voice, your stand is clear. If you disagree, make it clear. If you agree, make it clear. In few circumstances, in few occasions, you can use neutral voice. Okay, but make sure your neutral voices are not overriding your stand as an author. It is very, very critical. All right, make sure your neutral voices are not overriding your stance. Please, a minute. Please, is it understandable here? Does this make sense to you? This is very important. You don't have to write a PhD thesis, and when we are reading, you are neutral to the issues. Where do you stand? Make your stand clear. When you agree, make it clear. When you disagree, make it clear. In few circumstances, when you think you have to provide information for people to make their own stand, then that should be clear. But make sure that at least for 70-80% of your write-up, we know your stand. It is very, very important. Don't just be putting up neutral statements and expect people to think for you and you call yourself a doctoral candidate. No. A first degree person can do that. Masters maybe, but a doctoral candidate, you can never do that. All right. Then apart from the reporting verbs, okay, so look at this table, for example. Look at this table. When you make a statement like, from the sources, from the studies conducted in the 1990s, it is clear that it means that whatever statement you are going to make next, you are committed to the statement. You support that statement. Or in summary, it is beyond that, or in summary, it is well proven that it means that whatever follows, you are committed to it. You hold such a strong support for it. Okay. Or when you say to date, the strongest argument against punitive measures is made by social. When you make statements like this, you are showing a strong commitment to the propositions you are making. And then these statements also show agreement, but these agreements are not as strong as the commitment. They say the following issues demonstrate that. Demonstrate that means that whatever follows, you are in agreement with it. The examples given earlier shows that our third 1990 provides a useful approach to the words here, the phrase here, useful approach. Because you've described the approach as useful, it means that you agree to it. If you don't agree to it, you don't use something like this to describe it. Or this definition of so and so is more comprehensive. Maybe you are explaining a particular concept and you have brought different definition from different authors, but you are saying that a particular author's definition is more comprehensive. It shows that you are in agreement with that, or that is what you are going to use for your own work. And so you have to make it clear. All right. So and so defined, maybe define something, maybe define employee satisfaction as so and so. As soon as 2012 also define employee satisfaction as so and so. In this current work, I align with so and so 2012 definition of employee satisfaction. This is because the definition is more comprehensive, and so when the person is reading, they know your stance. It's very clear. Then you can also put out statements that show caution, the neutrality that I was talking about. Like so and so 2012 hypothesized that. Hypothesize means you are not supporting or you are not disproving. You are just putting it across that somebody has said this. Or at a broader level, the issues discussed suggest that. Suggest means you are not taking a point. You are not taking a stand. It's either you are, what do you call it? You are just putting it across that this situation or this knowledge is within the literature. So you are putting that across. You don't support, you don't disagree. But as much as possible, I'm telling you that make sure your stance are always clear, that your voice comes through your stance. All right. And then here, there are some adjectives, some adverbs, some phrases that sometimes can be used, okay, to highlight your voice more. If adjectives, if there's a strong, if you say that in the literature, there's a strong evidence that females report more satisfaction in the workplace than males. Your use of the strong is you bringing it in to show that this is where you lie. This is what you think the evidence points to. Or that there's a link between gender and work satisfaction, which suggests that females report higher work satisfaction. However, this link is empirically weak. All right, these are your words. This is your voice, but your voice shows you where you stand on the issues, okay? Or some adverbs that you can use, okay? Or it is clear that some phrases, it is clear that based on the evidence from the African studies or from the studies within the African region, it is clear that, or after analyzing all the studies conducted on this, there are no studies conducted in Ghana. It is therefore clear that the evidence that exists in literature may not reflect what exists in Ghana. So some phrases, some adverbs that helps people to know that these are your words, or these words are for you. This is your voice. We have to know. Sometimes people write and comments will come from supervisors and you said, provide reference, provide reference. And that is because you've put a general statement. They don't know whether it is your voice or it's not your voice. If they identify that it's your voice, they will not ask you to provide that reference because they know it is your voice. But if it's your voice and it's not clear, then they will think for you that it's somebody's voice. So acknowledge the voice. Okay, you have to acknowledge the voice. So if you've done your write-up already, I want you to use this to evaluate some of your paragraphs. Okay, you can take a typical paragraph, read the paragraph, and analyze these things. Whose voice do you think is more dominant in your writing? In the particular paragraph in your work that you read, ask yourself, whose voice do you think is dominant? Your own or that of the authors you are citing? Is your voice dominant? Is the author's voice dominant? Why, if the author's voice are more dominant than yours, you ask yourself, why is this the case? At the PhD level, you have to do something about it. Okay. Do you feel that you have achieved a successful balance between your own voice and that of the author's work you have cited? You are going to cite different kinds of authors, hundreds of them. You have to achieve a balance between your voice and all of them put together. So if we are hearing them 50%, we should also hear you 50%. We can't be hearing your voice, your authors 80%, and we are only hearing you 20%. And even the places where we are hearing you are the summaries and introductions. Those are the only places that we are hearing you. And when it comes to key arguments, we are not hearing your voice. When that happens, I say, the research is your own. We should be hearing your voice on key arguments. On your theoretical framework, you should be hearing your voice. On your philosophy, we should be hearing your voice. On your method, we should be hearing your voice. In your discussions, we should be hearing your voice. At the PhD level, always understand, it is my voice the lecturers are interested in. The examiner is interested in my voice. On this page, can my voice be found on this page? Is every page you should have your voice. Every paragraph should have your voice. Every subsection should have your voice. Your voice should start, your voice should end. Your voice should start, your voice should end. This is very critical, and that's what we call a writer's voice. Any question on this so far? Any question on the writer's voice? Many of you have done some form of write-up on your work, whether you've drafted introduction, you've written proposal, you've drafted chapters. How many of you?
Hello, Doc.
I have, please.
Yeah, hello.
Okay.
Yeah, how many of you have drafted some chapters of your work or even a proposal of your work?
Proposal, please.
Okay. So I need you to, when you go back, read your proposal again, paragraph by paragraph. For every paragraph, just do a percentage rating. How much of the voice there is your voice? Is it 50%? Is it 50-50? Is it 80-20? So maybe this paragraph, oh, I could see 80% of my voice. This paragraph, I could see the voice, all the voice there are for the authors have cited, so 0-100. This voice, this paragraph is inside, my voice is just 10% of it, so 10-90. Just do something like that and have an idea how well your voice is being heard in your own work. Okay, and that should influence you on going forward. You should always understand that your voice is what we want to hear. Is that okay? Any question to this?
Hello, Doc.
Yeah.
Yeah. Please, my case, I am done with the chapter 1 to 3.
Okay.
But walking us through, in fact, I will have to revisit the whole chapter, the chapter 2.
Okay.
Because a lot needs to be done. And so I will have to revisit it.
Okay. It may even be that your voice is there, but your voice has been silenced by the way you've done your citations.
Oh, okay.
Right? Yeah, it could be that the way you've done your citations have silenced your voice, or the way you've used certain words, certain reporting verbs have silenced your voice. Or you know, maybe in a particular statement you agree with the author, but you use a neutral verb, a reporting verb. That verb has silenced your voice. So if you agree with the author, use a reporting verb that show agreement. If you disagree, use a reporting verb that show disagreement. These things will bring out your voice more. It will amplify your voice. And I to say, okay, original loud, a big hall. Now, Kasana actually for and one command microphone. Kasana the other bad that all the microphone to amplify it. So it could be that your voice is there, but your voice has been buried. So if you find that your voice is there by your writing technique, the choice of words, or the organization of your text has buried your voice, then you do something about it to pull your voice out properly.
All right. Thank you so much, Doc.
All right. Any other question? If you don't take anything from this 2-day workshop at all, you have to understand that you should always be looking for your voice in your own write-up. Okay. So for those of you who send me write-ups for me to have a read over for you, if you haven't found your voice in your write-up, don't send it to me. If you have not found your voice in your own write-up, don't send it to me. All right. Okay. Any question? If not, we will have to end here.